Captain Sarah Mitchell adjusted her flight helmet one final time as she walked across the tarmac toward her F-16 Fighting Falcon. The desert air shimmered with heat waves, creating an almost dreamlike quality to the morning briefing she had just left. Intelligence reports indicated increased enemy activity along the border, but nothing suggested the nightmare that was about to unfold. Sarah had earned her place as squadron leader through 15 years of dedicated service and countless missions that had tested every aspect of her training. Her fellow pilots respected her tactical mind and steady nerves under pressure. She had a reputation for bringing everyone home, a record she took seriously every time she climbed into the cockpit. The mission seemed routine enough. Her squadron of 8 aircraft would conduct a patrol sweep along the disputed territory where recent insurgent activity had been detected. They would maintain radio contact with ground control and provide air support if called upon by friendly forces operating in the area. As Sarah completed her pre-flight checks, she noticed her wingman, Lieutenant Jake Morrison, approaching his aircraft with the same methodical precision she had come to expect from her team. Jake was young, but capable, having recently completed advanced combat training. This would be his first mission in potentially hostile territory. The other 6 pilots in their formation were equally well-trained professionals. Captain Elena Vasquez flew with the precision of someone who had logged over 2,000 combat hours. Major Tom Bradley brought tactical experience from 3 previous deployments. The remaining 4 pilots each contributed specialized skills that made their squadron one of the most effective units in their wing. Weather conditions appeared perfect for flying. Clear skies stretched endlessly in every direction, with visibility extending beyond 50 miles. Wind speeds remained minimal, creating ideal circumstances for both air-to-air combat and ground support operations if either became necessary. Sarah settled into her cockpit and began the startup sequence. The familiar hum of electronic systems coming online provided a sense of comfort that came from countless hours of training and operational experience. She methodically worked through each checklist item, ensuring every system functioned properly before requesting permission to taxi. Ground control cleared their formation for departure at exactly 0800 hours. Sarah led her squadron down the runway, feeling the powerful thrust of her engine as her aircraft lifted smoothly into the morning sky. The other 7 fighters followed in perfect formation, maintaining the precise spacing and positioning that marked professional military aviators. Their flight path took them northeast toward the patrol area, a region of mountainous terrain that provided numerous hiding places for hostile forces. Intelligence analysts had identified several locations where enemy fighters might establish temporary bases or launch attacks against friendly positions. 30 minutes into their flight, Sarah noticed something unusual on her radar display. Multiple contacts were appearing at the edge of her detection range, moving in a coordinated pattern that suggested military aircraft rather than civilian traffic. She immediately contacted ground control to report the situation and request clarification on any friendly forces operating in the area. The response from ground control sent a chill down her spine. No friendly aircraft were scheduled to be in that sector. The contacts on her radar represented unknown aircraft, potentially hostile, approaching their position at high speed. Sarah quickly assessed the tactical situation. Her squadron was flying in a standard patrol formation, not optimized for immediate combat. The unknown aircraft outnumbered them significantly, with at least 12 contacts visible on her radar screen. More concerning was their approach pattern, which indicated coordinated military tactics rather than random civilian flights. She ordered her squadron to assume combat spread formation, increasing the distance between aircraft to make them more difficult targets while maintaining mutual support capabilities. Each pilot acknowledged the order with crisp professionalism, despite the obvious tension in their voices. The unknown aircraft continued approaching at attack speed, leaving little doubt about their intentions. Sarah could see on her radar that they were flying advanced fighter aircraft, likely equipped with modern weapon systems and electronic countermeasures. her squadron faced a significant numerical disadvantage against what appeared to be a well-coordinated enemy force. Radio communication with ground control became increasingly urgent as controllers attempted to scramble additional support aircraft. However, the nearest reinforcements were at least 20 minutes away, far too long to wait given the rapidly developing situation. Sarah and her squadron would need to handle this threat on their own. The enemy formation split into two groups as they approached, attempting to attack from multiple directions simultaneously. This classic pincer movement would force Sarah's squadron to divide their attention and firepower, making them more vulnerable to individual attacks. Sarah made a rapid tactical decision that would demonstrate her leadership abilities under extreme pressure. Instead of allowing her formation to be caught between the two enemy groups, she ordered her squadron to turn directly toward the larger enemy formation and engage them before the second group could close the distance. This aggressive maneuver surprised the enemy pilots, who had expected the smaller American formation to adopt defensive tactics. Sarah's bold decision caught them off guard and disrupted their coordinated attack plan, giving her squadron a brief tactical advantage despite being outnumbered. The first missile launch came from an enemy aircraft at maximum range, streaking across the sky with a bright exhaust trail. Sarah immediately called out the threat over the radio, alerting her squadron to begin evasive maneuvers while maintaining their aggressive approach toward the enemy formation. Lieutenant Morrison, flying as Sarah's wingman, was the first to achieve a successful missile lock on an enemy aircraft. He called out his engagement over the radio and fired his first air-to-air missile at an enemy fighter that had committed to an attack run against Captain Vasquez. The battle had begun in earnest, with multiple aircraft from both sides maneuvering at high speed while engaging with missiles and cannon fire. Sarah found herself tracking two enemy aircraft simultaneously while maintaining awareness of her squadron's positions and the overall tactical situation. Her training took over as muscle memory guided her through complex aerial maneuvers while her mind processed multiple streams of information. Radar contacts, radio communications, weapon status, fuel levels, and threat warnings all demanded attention while she piloted her aircraft through violent defensive maneuvers. The enemy pilots demonstrated professional competence, using coordinated tactics and modern equipment to press their attack. However, Sarah quickly noticed that they seemed to be following a predetermined plan rather than adapting to the changing tactical situation. This rigidity would prove to be their weakness. She exploited this observation by making unexpected tactical moves that forced the enemy formation to react rather than execute their planned attacks. By keeping them off balance, she prevented them from using their numerical advantage effectively while creating opportunities for her squadron to engage individual targets. The aerial battle intensified as more missiles filled the sky, and aircraft from both sides maneuvered desperately to avoid incoming fire while positioning for their own attacks. Sarah maintained constant radio communication with her pilots, providing tactical updates and coordinating their defensive and offensive actions. Captain Vasquez scored the first confirmed kill when her missile found its target, causing an enemy aircraft to explode in a brilliant fireball that briefly lit up the morning sky. Her victory cry over the radio provided a much-needed morale boost for the squadron, proving that the enemy aircraft could be defeated despite their numerical advantage. However, the celebration was short-lived as the second enemy formation finally reached weapons range and began launching missiles at Sarah's squadron. Now, they faced attacks from multiple directions, exactly the situation Sarah had hoped to avoid with her aggressive initial maneuver. The tactical situation became increasingly desperate as enemy missiles crisscrossed the sky, and her pilots were forced to break formation to defend themselves. Sarah realized that maintaining squadron cohesion was becoming impossible under the intense pressure of the multi-directional attack. She made another crucial decision, ordering her pilots to engage in individual combat while maintaining radio contact to coordinate their actions. This freed each pilot to use their training and skills to maximum advantage while preventing the enemy from overwhelming any single aircraft with concentrated fire. The sky became a chaotic arena of high-speed combat as 14 aircraft engaged in deadly aerial combat. Missile exhaust trails crisscrossed the air while pilots pushed their aircraft and themselves to the limits of human and mechanical endurance. Sarah found herself engaged in a one-on-one duel with an enemy pilot who demonstrated exceptional skill and determination. Their aircraft danced through the sky in a deadly ballet as each tried to gain the advantage needed for a successful missile or cannon attack. The enemy pilot was clearly experienced, using advanced tactics and taking advantage of every opportunity to achieve a firing position. Sarah had to use every technique she had learned during her years of training and combat experience to stay alive while looking for her own chance to strike back. Their duel carried them away from the main battle as both pilots focused entirely on defeating their opponent. Sarah could hear the ongoing radio chatter from her squadron, indicating that the fight continued with mixed results for both sides. As she maneuvered to avoid another enemy missile, Sarah heard something over the radio that made her blood run cold. Lieutenant Morrison's voice, strained with pain and fear, reported that he had been hit and was losing control of his aircraft. Morrison was more than just her wingman. He was a young pilot she had personally trained and mentored. The thought of losing him, especially on his first combat mission, filled her with a cold rage that sharpened her focus and strengthened her determination. She broke off her individual engagement and turned toward Morrison's last known position, hoping to provide assistance or at least ensure his safe ejection if his aircraft was too badly damaged to save. However, what she saw when she arrived at his location changed everything about the battle and her approach to defeating the enemy force. Morrison's aircraft was indeed badly damaged, trailing smoke and losing altitude rapidly. But more importantly, Sarah could see that the enemy had concentrated multiple aircraft against him, apparently recognizing him as an easy target and moving to finish him off quickly. This tactical mistake by the enemy commander provided Sarah with the opportunity she needed to turn the tide of the battle. Instead of scattering their forces to engage individual targets, the enemy had bunched up to attack a single damaged aircraft, making themselves vulnerable to a coordinated counterattack. Sarah's mind raced through the tactical possibilities as she positioned her aircraft for an attack run against the enemy formation surrounding Morrison. She could see that several of her other squadron members were also moving to assist, having heard Morrison's distress call over the radio. The enemy pilots were so focused on finishing off the damaged American aircraft that they failed to notice the approaching threat until it was too late to react effectively. Sarah achieved missile lock on the lead enemy aircraft just as it was preparing to deliver the killing blow to Morrison's crippled fighter. Her missile struck the enemy aircraft amidships, causing it to explode in a massive fireball that temporarily blinded the other enemy pilots and disrupted their attack formation. Morrison used this distraction to execute a desperate evasive maneuver that carried him away from immediate danger. The successful rescue of her wingmen and the destruction of an enemy aircraft in such a dramatic fashion had an immediate impact on both the morale of her squadron and the tactical situation. Her pilots pressed their attacks with renewed confidence while the enemy formation seemed to hesitate, perhaps realizing that their opponents were more capable than initially anticipated. Sarah seized this psychological advantage by coordinating a series of aggressive attacks that prevented the enemy from regrouping and regaining the initiative. She used her radio to direct her pilots against specific targets while continuing to engage enemy aircraft herself. The battle was far from over, but Sarah had successfully prevented her squadron from being overwhelmed in the opening phase of the engagement. Now she needed to use her tactical skills and the proven abilities of her pilots to systematically defeat an enemy force that still outnumbered them significantly. The next phase of the battle would test every aspect of her leadership and combat skills as she attempted to achieve what many would consider impossible: defeating a superior enemy force through superior tactics and determination. The momentum shift in Sarah's favor proved temporary as the enemy commander quickly reorganized his remaining forces and adapted to the new tactical situation. What had initially seemed like a coordinated but predictable attack now evolved into a more sophisticated battle of maneuver and positioning. Sarah counted 9 enemy aircraft still active in the engagement area, compared to her 7 remaining fighters. Lieutenant Morrison had managed to reach minimum safe distance, but his aircraft was too damaged to continue fighting. He was attempting to return to base on his own while she focused on the continuing battle. The enemy formation split into 3 groups of 3 aircraft each, adopting a more flexible approach that allowed them to attack from multiple angles while maintaining mutual support. This new tactic demonstrated that their commander had learned from the earlier phase of the battle and was adapting his strategy accordingly. Sarah responded by dividing her own formation into 2 groups, keeping 4 aircraft, including herself, as the primary attack element, while assigning Captain Vasquez to lead the remaining 3 fighters in a supporting role. This arrangement maximized their ability to engage multiple enemy groups while maintaining enough cohesion to prevent individual aircraft from being overwhelmed. The revised tactical situation created a more complex battle environment where positioning and timing became critical factors in determining success or failure. Each pilot needed to maintain awareness of multiple enemy groups while coordinating with friendly forces to avoid conflicts in target selection or mutual interference. Sarah established a communications protocol that allowed her pilots to share targeting information quickly while avoiding radio congestion during critical phases of individual engagements. Each pilot would announce their intended target and engagement status using brief, standardized phrases that conveyed maximum information in minimum time. The enemy commander attempted to use his numerical advantage by forcing Sarah's formation to engage all 3 enemy groups simultaneously, preventing her from concentrating superior force against any individual target. This approach required her pilots to divide their attention and firepower, potentially creating opportunities for enemy aircraft to achieve successful attacks. However, Sarah had anticipated this tactic and developed a counter-strategy that relied on the superior training and experience of her pilots. Instead of attempting to engage all enemy groups equally, she would concentrate her force against one enemy group while using defensive maneuvers and electronic countermeasures to avoid decisive engagements with the other 2. This approach required precise timing and coordination, as her pilots would need to transition rapidly between offensive and defensive roles based on the changing tactical situation. The success of this strategy depended on each pilot's ability to assess threats quickly and respond appropriately without requiring detailed instructions from their squadron leader. Captain Vasquez demonstrated exceptional situational awareness by identifying the enemy group that appeared most committed to their attack approach. She recommended this group as the primary target for their concentrated attack, noting that their positioning made them vulnerable to a coordinated missile engagement from multiple angles. Sarah agreed with Vasquez's assessment and immediately began coordinating the attack while simultaneously maneuvering to avoid missiles from the other 2 enemy groups. The complexity of managing offensive operations against one target while defending against attacks from multiple directions tested her abilities as both a pilot and tactical commander. The coordinated attack against the selected enemy group achieved immediate success when 2 enemy aircraft were hit by missiles fired from different angles, preventing them from using evasive maneuvers effectively. The 3rd aircraft in that group attempted to escape, but was pursued by Major Bradley, who had positioned himself to intercept any surviving enemy fighters. Bradley's pursuit of the escaping enemy aircraft led him away from the main battle area, but Sarah judged this acceptable given the importance of preventing any enemy fighters from surviving to report on American tactics or aircraft capabilities. She ordered him to continue the pursuit while the rest of her formation dealt with the remaining 6 enemy aircraft. The destruction of 3 enemy aircraft in rapid succession had a significant psychological impact on the remaining enemy pilots, who began flying more defensively and seemed less willing to press their attacks aggressively. Sarah recognized this change in enemy behavior and immediately exploited it by adopting more aggressive tactics designed to maintain pressure on the demoralized enemy force. She ordered her remaining pilots to pursue individual enemy aircraft rather than maintaining formation integrity, gambling that the enemy pilots' reduced aggressiveness would prevent them from coordinating effective attacks against the dispersed American fighters. This decision required complete confidence in her pilots' individual combat abilities. The gamble paid off as her pilots demonstrated the superior training and experience that Sarah had counted on. Each American fighter pilot proved capable of engaging enemy aircraft in individual combat while maintaining enough situational awareness to avoid being overwhelmed by multiple attackers. Captain Vasquez achieved another confirmed kill when her target attempted an unsuccessful head-on attack that left him vulnerable to her cannon fire. The enemy pilot's decision to accept such an unfavorable engagement reflected the deteriorating morale and tactical discipline of the remaining enemy force. The tactical situation continued evolving in Sarah's favor as enemy aircraft began attempting to disengage from combat rather than pressing their attacks. However, Sarah was determined not to allow any enemy fighters to escape, both for security reasons and to send a clear message about the consequences of attacking American forces. She coordinated a systematic pursuit of the remaining enemy aircraft, assigning specific targets to each of her pilots while maintaining overall tactical control of the engagement. The pursuit phase required different skills than the defensive battle they had been fighting, emphasizing speed and persistence over complex maneuvering. During the pursuit phase, Sarah personally engaged 2 enemy aircraft that were attempting to escape together, apparently hoping that mutual support would improve their chances of survival. She used superior positioning and aggressive maneuvering to separate the 2 aircraft, making them easier targets for individual engagement. Her attack on the first enemy aircraft succeeded when her missile struck the target's engine section, causing catastrophic damage that forced the pilot to eject immediately. The second enemy pilot witnessed his wingman's destruction and attempted an even more desperate escape maneuver that carried him directly into the engagement zone of another American fighter. The systematic destruction of enemy aircraft continued as Sarah's pilots demonstrated the effectiveness of their training and equipment against an enemy force that was becoming increasingly desperate and disorganized. Each successful engagement reduced the enemy's options while increasing the confidence and aggressive spirit of the American pilots. Major Bradley returned from his individual pursuit with confirmation of another enemy aircraft destroyed, bringing the total enemy losses to 7 aircraft with only 5 remaining. His successful independent operation validated Sarah's decision to allow her pilots to operate individually when tactical conditions permitted such action. The remaining enemy aircraft attempted to form a defensive formation, but their reduced numbers made effective mutual support impossible against the coordinated attacks of Sarah's squadron. The enemy pilots were forced to choose between accepting unfavorable individual engagements or attempting to escape without supporting their fellow pilots. Sarah exploited this dilemma by coordinating simultaneous attacks against multiple enemy aircraft, preventing them from concentrating their defensive efforts effectively. Her pilots used overlapping attack approaches that made defensive maneuvering extremely difficult for the enemy aircraft while maximizing the probability of successful missile or cannon engagements. The penultimate enemy aircraft fell victim to a coordinated attack by 2 American fighters who had positioned themselves on opposite sides of their target, making evasive maneuvering ineffective. The enemy pilot's attempts to avoid one missile carried him directly into the engagement envelope of the second American aircraft. With only 1 enemy aircraft remaining, Sarah faced a tactical decision about whether to continue the engagement or allow the surviving enemy pilot to escape. Military doctrine generally favored destroying all enemy forces when possible, but humanitarian considerations argued for allowing a clearly defeated opponent to withdraw from combat. The enemy pilot made the decision for her by attempting one final attack against her aircraft, apparently choosing to die fighting rather than accept the humiliation of retreat. Sarah respected this choice while preparing to defend herself against what was likely to be a desperate and potentially unpredictable attack. The final enemy pilot demonstrated considerable skill and determination in his attack approach, using advanced maneuvering techniques and electronic countermeasures to make himself a difficult target. However, his isolation from any supporting forces made his position ultimately hopeless against Sarah's superior tactical position. Sarah's experience and training proved decisive in the final engagement, as she used precise positioning and timing to achieve a successful missile lock despite the enemy pilot's evasive maneuvers. Her missile struck the target cleanly, ending the battle with complete victory for her squadron. The sudden silence over the radio after hours of intense combat created an almost surreal atmosphere as Sarah and her pilots began assessing their situation and checking on each other's status. The realization that they had achieved complete victory against superior numbers was slowly sinking in as adrenaline levels began to decrease. Sarah conducted a systematic check of her squadron status, confirming that all pilots except Morrison were operational and had sufficient fuel to return to base safely. Morrison's damaged aircraft had continued flying toward their home base and was being escorted by rescue aircraft that had been scrambled during the battle. The tactical debriefing would come later, but Sarah could already identify several key factors that had contributed to their success against overwhelming odds. Superior training, better equipment, tactical flexibility, and aggressive leadership had combined to overcome the enemy's numerical advantage and achieve complete victory. Her pilots' voices over the radio reflected a mixture of relief, excitement, and professional satisfaction as they realized the magnitude of their achievement. They had not only survived an attack by superior numbers, but had systematically destroyed every enemy aircraft without suffering any friendly losses. The return flight to base provided an opportunity for reflection on the lessons learned during the engagement and the tactical innovations that had proven successful. Sarah made mental notes of particularly effective techniques that could be incorporated into future training programs and shared with other squadrons. As her formation approached their home base, Sarah could see emergency vehicles and medical personnel standing by to assist Morrison's damaged aircraft. The sight reminded her that their victory had come at a cost, even though all her pilots were returning alive from what could easily have been a catastrophic defeat. Ground control cleared her formation for immediate landing, giving them priority over all other air traffic. The recognition of their achievement was already beginning, though the full implications of their success would not be understood until intelligence analysts had time to evaluate the tactical and strategic significance of the engagement. Sarah's aircraft touched down smoothly on the familiar runway where the battle had begun just a few hours earlier. The routine nature of the landing seemed almost anticlimactic after the intensity of aerial combat, but it represented the successful completion of what would prove to be a historically significant engagement. The aircraft engines wound down to silence as Sarah completed her post-flight checklist with the same methodical precision she had maintained throughout the mission. Ground crew members were already approaching her aircraft, their faces reflecting a mixture of curiosity and admiration as word of the engagement spread through the base. Sarah removed her helmet and took a deep breath of the desert air, feeling the weight of leadership and responsibility that had carried her through the battle beginning to lift from her shoulders. The transition from combat intensity to peacetime routine always required a mental adjustment that she had learned to manage over years of operational experience. Lieutenant Morrison's aircraft had landed safely despite significant battle damage, confirming that all 8 members of her squadron had survived what could have been a devastating defeat. The sight of his damaged fighter being towed toward the maintenance hangar served as a sobering reminder of how close they had come to suffering casualties. Morrison himself was being examined by medical personnel as a precautionary measure, though he appeared to be uninjured except for minor cuts from flying debris when his aircraft was hit. His successful emergency landing demonstrated the training and composure that had earned him a place in Sarah's squadron despite his relative inexperience. The base commander, Colonel James Patterson, was waiting for Sarah as she climbed down from her aircraft. His expression combined relief at her safe return with obvious curiosity about the details of an engagement that had already been reported to higher headquarters through official channels. Patterson's first words reflected the magnitude of what Sarah's squadron had accomplished. Intelligence reports confirmed that 12 enemy aircraft had been detected approaching their patrol area, but only Sarah's 8 fighters had been available to respond to the threat. The mathematical impossibility of their victory was not lost on anyone familiar with aerial combat statistics. Sarah's initial report would be brief and factual, focusing on the tactical sequence of events rather than speculating about enemy capabilities or intentions. Military protocol required detailed written reports and formal debriefings, but the immediate need was to provide operational commanders with information needed for any follow-up actions. The enemy aircraft had been identified as advanced fighters comparable to American equipment, suggesting that they represented a professional military force rather than irregular fighters using obsolete aircraft. This information had significant implications for intelligence assessments and future defensive planning. Sarah described her tactical decisions during the engagement, emphasizing the importance of aggressive action and coordinated teamwork in overcoming numerical disadvantage. Her willingness to attack rather than defend had disrupted enemy plans and created opportunities that her pilots had exploited effectively. Colonel Patterson listened carefully to her preliminary report, asking specific questions about enemy tactics and equipment that would be important for intelligence analysis. His questions reflected the professional curiosity of an experienced combat commander who understood the rarity of such a decisive victory against superior numbers. The medical examination required of all pilots following combat missions confirmed that Sarah and her team had emerged from the engagement without serious injuries. The physical and mental stress of aerial combat could have delayed effects that might not be immediately apparent, making these examinations an important safety precaution. While medical personnel completed their evaluations, Sarah began organizing the detailed information that would be required for the formal debriefing session scheduled for later that afternoon. Each pilot would need to provide a complete account of their individual actions and observations during the engagement. The intelligence value of the engagement extended beyond the tactical lessons learned during the battle itself. The enemy force had revealed capabilities and tactics that provided important insights into their training, equipment, and operational doctrine. This information would be valuable for preparing defensive strategies against future attacks. Sarah's squadron had also demonstrated the effectiveness of current American training programs and equipment under actual combat conditions. Their success validated years of investment in pilot training, aircraft development, and tactical doctrine that had been tested in the most demanding possible circumstances. The psychological impact of their victory would extend far beyond their immediate unit. Other pilots and ground personnel would draw confidence from proof that American forces could defeat superior numbers when properly trained and equipped. This morale boost would have measurable effects on readiness and combat effectiveness throughout their wing. Media attention was already beginning to focus on the engagement, though military censors would carefully control the release of information to protect operational security. The story of 8 pilots defeating 12 enemy aircraft would naturally attract public interest while providing positive publicity for military recruiting efforts. Sarah found herself reflecting on the individual contributions of each pilot in her squadron during the battle. Captain Vasquez had demonstrated exceptional tactical awareness and marksmanship. Major Bradley had shown initiative and persistence during his individual pursuit of enemy aircraft. The other pilots had each contributed specialized skills that made their collective success possible. Lieutenant Morrison's performance, despite his inexperience, had been particularly impressive. His ability to maintain control of his damaged aircraft and execute a successful emergency landing while under enemy fire demonstrated the quality of American pilot training. His survival also validated the protective systems built into modern fighter aircraft. The formal debriefing session began 3 hours after landing, with Sarah providing a detailed chronological account of the engagement from her perspective as squadron leader. Intelligence officers recorded every detail while asking specific questions designed to extract information relevant to their analytical responsibilities. Each pilot provided their individual perspective on the battle, contributing details that Sarah had not been able to observe while managing the overall tactical situation. These multiple viewpoints created a comprehensive picture of the engagement that would be invaluable for both tactical analysis and training development. The enemy aircraft wreckage was being recovered by specialized teams equipped to analyze foreign military technology. Initial reports suggested that the aircraft were indeed modern fighters equipped with advanced weapons and electronic systems, confirming the professional nature of the enemy force they had defeated. Sarah's tactical innovations during the battle were already being studied by training command personnel who recognized their potential application to future combat scenarios. Her decision to attack rather than defend, and her use of concentrated force against divided enemy formations, demonstrated principles that could be incorporated into standard tactical doctrine. The strategic implications of the engagement were being evaluated at the highest levels of military command. The presence of 12 advanced enemy aircraft in disputed territory suggested organized military action rather than isolated terrorism or insurgency. This information would influence future defensive deployments and diplomatic initiatives. Recognition for Sarah's squadron would come through official channels, but informal acknowledgement of their achievement was already spreading throughout the military community. Other pilots and commanders understood the rarity of such a decisive victory and the exceptional skill required to achieve it. Sarah's personal role as squadron leader during the engagement would be highlighted in official reports and award citations. Her tactical decision-making under extreme pressure had been the critical factor that enabled her pilots to use their individual skills effectively against superior numbers. The training value of the engagement would be preserved through detailed analysis and simulation development. Future pilots would be able to study the tactical sequence and practice similar scenarios in controlled training environments, learning from Sarah's experience without facing actual combat risks. 3 weeks later, Sarah stood at attention as the base commander read the citation for her Distinguished Flying Cross, awarded for extraordinary heroism during aerial combat. Her squadron members were receiving similar recognition for their individual contributions to what military historians were already calling one of the most remarkable aerial victories in recent history. The ceremony was attended by senior officers from across the military establishment, reflecting the significance of their achievement for American military prestige and tactical doctrine. Sarah's parents had flown in from her hometown to witness the recognition of their daughter's courage and professional competence. The citation specifically mentioned her tactical leadership and personal courage in the face of overwhelming odds. Her willingness to take calculated risks and her ability to coordinate complex combat operations had enabled 8 American pilots to defeat 12 enemy aircraft without suffering any casualties. Sarah's squadron had been reinforced and re-equipped following the engagement, reflecting the strategic importance of maintaining strong defensive capabilities in the region. The enemy force they had defeated appeared to have been part of a larger military buildup that required continued vigilance and preparation. The lessons learned from the engagement had already been incorporated into training programs at pilot training schools across the country. Sarah herself had been invited to speak at the Air War College about tactical leadership and decision-making under pressure, sharing her experience with future military leaders. Lieutenant Morrison had fully recovered from his injuries and returned to flying status, expressing gratitude for Sarah's leadership during the battle and her role in ensuring his survival. His experience had accelerated his development as a combat pilot and strengthened his confidence in challenging situations. The enemy's failure to achieve their objectives in the engagement had apparently disrupted larger military plans, as intelligence sources reported significant changes in enemy force deployments and operational patterns. Sarah's squadron had accomplished far more than defending their immediate area. They had influenced the broader strategic situation through their tactical success. Media coverage of the engagement had been carefully managed to protect operational security while highlighting the professionalism and effectiveness of American military personnel. Sarah had given several interviews emphasizing the importance of training, teamwork, and maintaining defensive preparedness. Sarah's promotion to major was announced 6 months after the engagement, recognizing both her combat leadership and her contributions to tactical development and training programs. Her new assignment would involve training other squadron leaders and developing improved combat tactics based on lessons learned from actual combat experience. The engagement had demonstrated that numerical advantage could be overcome through superior training, equipment, and tactical leadership. Sarah's squadron had proved that 8 properly trained and equipped pilots could defeat 12 enemy aircraft when led by someone capable of making effective decisions under extreme pressure. Her achievements served as inspiration for other military personnel facing seemingly impossible odds in their own operational environments. The principle that courage, skill, and determination could overcome numerical disadvantage had applications far beyond aerial combat, influencing military thinking across all service branches. Years later, Sarah would reflect on the engagement as a defining moment in her military career, but also as validation of the training and support provided by countless other military personnel who had contributed to her development as a pilot and leader. Her individual achievement had been made possible by the collective efforts of many others who shared credit for the success. The enemy attack that had claimed her leader's attention until she fired back and eliminated every single fighter had become a textbook example of how proper tactical leadership could achieve seemingly impossible victories. Sarah Mitchell's name would be remembered alongside other military leaders who had demonstrated that courage and competence could overcome any odds.